So I'm sure that many of you guys looking to buy a new entry-level MacBook are cross-shopping between these two, the M1 MacBook Air and of course, the M2 MacBook Air. And so in today's video I thought I'd help out and discuss whether you should save your money and get the M1 or spend a little extra and get the M2. But first, make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumours, and with that being said, let's just delve in. So beginning with the biggest change between these two MacBooks, and that is the design. In fact, that's probably the biggest selling point of the M2 Air because yes, it looks gorgeous and makes the M1 Air look pretty ancient. And yes, we finally have a design that fits the Air branding because the M1 version, believe it or not, was thicker than the base MacBook Pro, so the much thinner and lighter design of this new model is pretty nice. The smaller bezels are also appreciated, and I do forget the notch is there most of the time, so that is not a massive issue. And I also want to mention the larger function row is pretty underrated since it does make the keys and the Touch ID scanner much easier to reach and press. The new design isn't perfect though, because after using this new Air for a bit, I do miss the wedge, to be honest. It makes the typing experience on the Air that much nicer, and of course, it did give it a unique design element that separated it from the rest of the lineup. So it's sad the wedge is dead. And yes, I do want to take a moment to give the M1 Air some credit because this design is still very premium, and for those of you coming from older laptops, there is still a lot to like here. So let's move on to the performance, and obviously we have the new brand spanking M2 chip in the M2, and I won't bore you with benchmarks because everyone has already covered that side in detail, but yes, this is a small upgrade over the M1 chip. And really that goes to show how monumental M1 was, because even after 2 years of this being on the market, day-to-day performance between these machines are very similar, and I've not noticed anything massively different performance-wise. I mean, I was expecting the new encoders and decoders to do their magic with video editing on M2, but that's actually not been the case. Though I do want to say that maybe software needs to be optimized for M2 first to take advantage of all these new features. Either way though, for regular use, you really won't see much of a difference between these two laptops in terms of performance, and that does make the M1 Air a highly appealing product, but let me get to that at the end. And by the way, for those wondering about throttling with these two fanless Macs, for my use, which is slightly above the average consumer, these Macs have had no performance issues, and I really appreciate the fanless design, to be honest, especially when I'm editing, and of course, I don't have to hear a stupid fan in the background. And also, if you're wondering if the 24GB option on the M2 makes a difference, I personally doubt it. Now, I would upgrade to 16GB if possible because that could help future-proof the device, but even with the base model 8GB M2 Air, I've noticed no RAM issues, and I've been pushing this machine with multiple tabs and Final Cut. Really, 24GB of RAM only makes sense if you plan to use this for professional use, like video or photo editing, but of course, if you're gonna max the Air out, I think you're better off getting the higher end Pro. Anyways, back to the comparison, let's talk about the display, and I'll be honest guys, apart from it being bigger, the M2 Air's display is pretty much near identical to the M1. Now that's not a bad thing because the M1 Air does have a terrific display, but it does make me sad that the rumours regarding mini LED coming to the M2 MacBook Air did not pan out. Oh, and yes, I'm aware the display is brighter with this new model, but since I use my MacBooks indoors nearly all the time, I've never had an issue with the brightness of the M1's panel. And to be honest, the 0.3 difference in the display does not make a huge difference. Really, the only thing I appreciate is, like I said before, the thinner bezels. Now moving on to the cameras, mics and speakers, I would say there's a noticeable improvement in this area of the device. Now I really did not understand the hate over 720p webcams with the older MacBooks, because nearly all webcams suck. However, after testing the M2 Air, I can see why some were complaining, because this new sensor makes a massive difference. And the same goes for the speakers. This again was something I did not really complain about with the M1 Air, and I still think they're great, but the M2 Air, whilst not having speaker holes on the actual casing, is even better, which is pretty nice. Right, so Mark Gurman gives us some new details regarding the iPhone 14 series, and to be honest, these new details are basically information we've already heard about, and so let this be a recap to you guys of all the leaks and rumors regarding these new iPhones. Right, so Mark Gurman gives us some new details regarding the iPhone 14 series, and to be honest, these new details are basically information we've already heard about, and so let this be a recap to you guys of all the leaks and rumors regarding these new iPhones. And do remember, you get spatial audio with the new Air, which I actually do notice. It makes a massive difference, especially when using AirPods, and so I'm glad Apple has brought this down to the entry-level lineup. Now, mics-wise, there really is not a massive improvement. They're still pretty solid. So this is a mic test for the M2 MacBook. Let me know how it sounds. And I thought I'd mention here that, of course, I'm aware the base SSD has slower speeds, but in terms of data use, I have not noticed any issues. And so yes, while this does suck, and I would love to see Apple give us 512 gigs of base storage, this is also not a massive issue in terms of real-life usage. But anyways, here's a quick mic test on the M1 Air. Keyboard-wise, as I said, I like the larger function row, but this is essentially the same Magic Keyboard we had on M1, so that is to say it's the gold standards, and the same goes for the trackpad. And in case you're wondering if Touch ID is faster with the M2 Air, I did test this, and no, that's not the case, though to be fair, the M1 model was already good enough. So talking about the ports, I think the big upgrade with the M2 Air's MagSafe, not only is it convenient if I trip over the wire, but of course, with the M1 Air I do find 2 ports sort of limiting, and so now I can charge the Mac separately with the MagSafe port, and then use the 2 Thunderbolt ports for peripherals, which is pretty nice. And also do remember that if you do get the right brick, the M2 Air does charge faster, though I could care less about charging speed since the M1 does last a full day of use, so I just charge it overnight. And that conveniently brings me on to battery life, because in my limited testing, the M1 Air and the M2 Air perform very similarly, which does kinda suck. Now don't get me wrong, battery life is still fantastic on the M1 Air, but of course, if there was an improvement, that could have been a massive selling point in my opinion, because not only would it last longer, but of course, the battery would also degrade much slower because you're using less cycles. Because yes, with long-term use, I have noticed the M1 Air has dropped to 92% battery health. Now I've had this for over a year, so that is to be expected, but obviously if the M2 Air did have a much bigger battery inside, I'm sure the degradation would have been less. Then again, I guess Apple thought that consumers would prefer a thinner design, and I can't stress enough that 18 hours of battery life is still fantastic and is easily better than most laptops. In fact, as I said, I've yet to see my M1 Air hit 0%, so yeah, the battery life is really great on both models. So that is basically everything I think, and so now you may be wondering which of these do I recommend? Well, that's where pricing comes into play, because while the M2 Air is a fantastic product and brings plenty of nice upgrades, it's also a lot more expensive. So here in the UK, for example, the M2 Air starts at £1,249, but the M1 Air can be found for £849 and could potentially get even cheaper, and I'm aware this is also the case in other markets like the US. And well, I just don't think the M2 Air does enough to justify spending £400 more, because at the end of the day, the M1 Air offers the basics of what makes a great Mac: stupendously good battery life, blazing fast performance, and rock solid reliability. And while M2 does offer nice perks, like the new design for example, I wouldn't say it's must-have features, since everything else the M1 Air offers is still good enough. In fact, in all this time I've used the M2 Air, not once have I felt that I can't go back to the M1 Air, because the upgrades it offers are nice, but they are things I can live without, to be honest, especially when I'm saving a lot of money. And I'm sure that many students are going to buy these Macs, and for typical college use, the M1 Air is still more than enough, and you're better off spending the difference on a base iPad to accompany your Mac or external storage. Now don't get me wrong, if you can justify it, the M2 Air will be a great Mac and you'll enjoy using it, but if I had to pick one, the M1 Air still offers the best bang for your buck. In fact, like I mentioned a while back, if you're considering upgrading the M2 Air, it gets very close to the price of a 14-inch, so you might want to consider that too, since of course you get mini LED 120Hz, more ports, and also better performance. So yeah, those are my thoughts, but let me know in the comments guys, do you agree with me or not? Anyways, thank you for watching guys, make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumours. Check out everything above on my thoughts regarding the base MacBook Pro, and on that note, see ya peeps.